ahead and introduce. I'm not sure if our webcast is on yet or not, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm Jennifer Dill. I'm a faculty member in charge of this weekly seminar. Welcome. Normally Rob Bertini is here. I think he's coming. He just must be late. He's a faculty member in civil and environmental engineering. And we are happy today to have two folks here to talk about the TravelSmart program. We have Lavinia Gordon from the Portland's Department of Transportation and Transportation Options Group. And we have Courtney Kulyk from SocialData. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to them, though I will remind you, and for those of you who are new, this is new information. If you are going to ask a question, please use the microphone in front of you and hold down on the touch button while you're asking the question. That way the people who are watching us on the web or later on when it's archived hear your question as well as the answer. Thank you.
Hi. I'm Lavinia Gordon from Transportation Options, City of Portland. This is Courtney Kulyk. We hired SocialData. Can you all hear me back there? To be the consultant for this TravelSmart pilot project that we started last fall. And I don't know how much you know about TravelSmart or Individualized Marketing, but at the end of the session you'll know lots. So I'll just start. As I said, we launched it last September. We found out about TravelSmart by, I was actually reading, does anybody read the Urban Transportation Monitor? You do. And I read about this project in Australia, in Perth, and they had achieved a 14% reduction in car travel, and that's a big number. So I was duly impressed, and we actually called Australia and talked to Bruce James, who Courtney had worked with, and found out more about TravelSmart. And we actually got him to come to Portland. And the more we found out about it, the more we liked it, and decided that we would like to do it here if we could find the money to do it. So that was the beginning of TravelSmart. But before I go into what the project is and how individualized marketing works and all that, now this is a presentation I have often given to people who don't know about Portland, so you will know some of this. But I'll go through it anyway. So you know that Portland is a leader in sustainability, innovative transportation, land use planning, all of that. That we have a great system of bikeways, over 200 miles of bikeways. That Bicycling Magazine has named Portland the best city for bicycling for, I think, 4 or 5 years in a row. We have the first modern streetcar in America. We're expanding that system. We have lots of streets and sidewalks. And, whoops, now I did this. How do I go backwards? Back. There we go. And even though our drive-alone trips are increasing, they're increasing a lot slower than they are in the rest of the United States. The rate is better. So that's the good news, but there's some bad news as well. So the daily vehicle miles traveled is 27 million. That equals 56 round trips to the moon. And as some of you may know, transportation sources are the largest source of CO2. That's growing in Multnomah County. It's about 1/3 of the county's total carbon dioxide emissions are transportation sources. That's not good. This piece, the obesity rates, the CDC is becoming very concerned about obesity. You're probably reading about it in the paper. Oregon is not in good shape in terms of obesity. So there are going to be a series of slides that are pretty interesting. And watch the light blue. So this is obviously gets, as you go down here, the dark blue is 15 to 19%. The light blue is over 20%. And so here we go. So as you can see, over time, obesity rates increase. and get worse and worse. And there you have it, Oregon. Oregon is the fattest state in the West. It's also, ironically, the hungriest state, which I'm not sure I quite understand, but it's not a good situation. And it's the link between obesity and chronic disease is obvious. All those diseases are linked to obesity. So we were looking for a tool that would encourage people to be physically active and make it part of their daily routine. And that was one of the things about TravelSmart that was very appealing. But one of the things we wondered about was whether TravelSmart, which had been used in Australia and also throughout Europe, would work in the United States. It had never been used in the United States. This is the first test of individualized marketing in the U.S. So we decided to test it. So we're going to talk about individualized marketing and what that actually is. But it was conceived by SocialData, the firm that Courtney works with. And Werner Broeg, who's her boss, he's from Munich, Germany, came up with the whole concept. It's what they call a soft policy, as opposed to a hard policy, which means building roads and bridges. And one of the reasons that we like it was first that it recognizes that the main reason that people don't take alternative modes of transportation is the lack of information. That, there may be a bus stop in front of their house, but they may not know when it comes or where it actually is. And second, it links the people who want to change their behavior with the information that they need to do it. And it only gives them the information that they ask for. Third, it assumes that everybody can shift 1 or 2 trips a week. And fourth, it's a strategy that applies to all kinds of trips, not just work trips. And in the work that I do, transportation demand management, traditionally that has been focused on the work trip. A lot of programs, go into the employer and they work with employees and try to get them to carpool, and but work trips are only 30% of the trips. Now, this chart is a chart from SocialData that they came up with after doing what's called an in-depth survey in Australia. We are hoping to do that here in Portland. The in-depth survey is pretty involved. They go into the home and they interview over 100 people and ask them not only how they traveled, which is kind of a basic survey, but they ask them questions about why they traveled and what kept them from traveling a certain way. So what they found was that, the blue, the 31%, had no other way of traveling besides a car. And 20% had constraints such as they couldn't use an alternative mode. There's Francie Bryce. That's all right. My co-project manager just walked in. They couldn't take an alternative mode because they, for example, they might have to take their grandmother to the hospital and they couldn't take the bus to do that. And that's the 15%. 20% were already biking, walking, or taking transit. But this big piece right here, which is the largest piece of the pie, people were driving because purely for subjective reasons. These people actually could have taken the bus, they could have biked, they could have walked, but they believed that they couldn't. They didn't know that there was a bus. They thought it took longer than it actually did. reasons like that. And that's the market for TravelSmart. Those are the people that, if you gave them the information that they actually needed, they would probably or might change the way they travel. So that's a big piece of this. So what is individualized marketing? As I said, we're going to go into this in a lot of depth, but basically it's a research-based program. It starts with a baseline survey, which is what we did last fall. This involves a one-day trip diary. And then after the survey, there's what Werner calls an intervention. We tried to find a better word for that because it just doesn't quite fit. But that involves actually providing the information that people ask for and sometimes home visits. And then there's a follow-up survey which measures what happens. And one of the reasons that TravelSmart appealed to us was, as I said, it's one of the few trip reduction strategies that addresses the non-work trip. And it also focuses on the place that where most travel decisions are made, and that's in the home, as opposed to the workplace. Another reason we like TravelSmart was that we don't have the budget as a public agency to compete with the car manufacturers and huge media campaigns. We just can't do it. So TravelSmart is a way of singling out the people that we need to talk to and talking just to them, as opposed to spending lots and lots of money on a media campaign. Now, I'm going to switch it over. Courtney's going to talk to you a little bit about how individualized marketing works. So we have to do a little switch here. I'm just going to hold this thing. Okay, there you go. All set?
I'm just going to hold this. Okay, I work for the firm SocialData America, and we are the firm that was contracted, as Lavinia said, to perform the individualized marketing as well as any data gathering that was necessary to evaluate the marketing campaign. So if you can press click. So to begin, the city was looking for a project that would reduce vehicles miles traveled within the area that they selected, Multnomah and Hillsdale. And they found individualized marketing extremely attractive and contracted us out to do a pilot project. So the initial project is in the green, if we start there, and that is to sample 600 households and perform the individualized marketing with these 600 households. In order to do that, we needed to see what the travel patterns were like in that area at the beginning, so we'd have something to measure the effectiveness of the campaign at the end. So from this objective, we created a before study, which we got some baseline information that was collected in September. It's a mail-back survey and self-administered. So the households fill it out on their own free will, and it's for 1 day of travel, which they are assigned. And within the 600 households, each person's assigned 1 day, or each household's assigned 1 day. And that way we'll get a picture over the entire week of travel, including weekends. Our response rate was 65%, which we were quite impressed with. It's a fairly good response rate for here in America. You'll see in Europe and in Australia, you'll be looking at response rates in the range of 75 to 80%, but still fairly good for us in America. And as I said, that was conducted in September 2002. Then from then, we did the individualized marketing to the 600 households, and that was done in the month of October. And the next few slides, I will go through the process that was taken during that month. And then in the after survey was done in February and March, and we received a 66% response rate, and that was to measure the effectiveness of the intervention. So here's just put some numbers to the process. We directly mailed 1,400 households surveys. Of those 1,400, some houses moved, had no longer lived there, and had no a forwarding address, either didn't have a forwarding address or they no longer lived in that area. So they were removed from the survey sample, and we get a new adjusted gross, which was approximately around 1,200, is what we started off with then. We had 730 households respond, which equated to 65% response rate. And then from there, after the survey was completed, which stopped here, then we began our individualized marketing campaign. 600 households were selected out of the 730 as per our contract with the City of Portland. And from these 600 households, we segment them into specific groups. Traditional market segmentation generally uses demographics, or age, sex, income. What we do is we segment them on how likely they are going to change and if they're willing to change. So we start at the very important people, the not interested people, the people that say no thank you, and we leave them in peace, and they generally will say that they're never going to change. Then that was 33% of the 600, so we start off with. Then there's those that are very important, the interested, where people have indicated that they are interested in changing, that they are interested in more information, and that they would like to join further dialogue with us with the individualized marketing process. Then there are 26% that are already regular users, and those people are already using environmentally friendly modes. And there's two types of regular users, those that are using them and don't require any more information, and so we just thank them and for using the environmentally friendly modes, and we'll give them a reward. And then there's those that require additional information, and they also will join the dialogue. Is there a question?
How you got from the 730 that responded to the 600 you decided contact?
The contract specified that that was a first-come, first-served basis. So those first 600 surveys that were received into the office became the first 600 for the gross. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. I apologize. Is there any other questions? Or just keep going? So this is individualized marketing process that we start off with. So I just talked about the market segmentation and how we segment them through various questions in a dialogue. And they become the ends, which will start here. We no longer further contact them. Then there are the I's, which I believe was 41%. And we begin the dialogue process in terms of motivation and empowerment. And from there, they are given a service sheet, which has information that the City of Portland has provided us with, that will provide them information in order to use alternative transportation. So what they do is they select the information that they want, only what they want, and then we deliver the information. And if the information is still not enough and they still require additional information, then there's what's called a system experience or a home visit. And that's where the City of Portland went out into the homes and went through bus timetables with people, helped them, show them where the bus stop was, perhaps tune up their bike a little bit, and provide some walking information and maps. And so that was, if someone still needed some extra information and some extra reinforcement, then they went to a home visit. But it doesn't always have to go to a home visit. Sometimes when people receive information, that's enough for them to make a change in their lifestyle. And then the regular users, as I said, they were divided into two groups, are without and are with. Are without is those people that don't require any more additional information but are already using environmentally friendly modes. And we simply just say thank you, here's a gift, which was a TravelSmart bag and an umbrella and a nice walking map, which had a $5 value to it. And they received that, and we just left them as is. There was, however, numbers and information for them to contact us or the city if they required some information in the future. And, well, we can. After, you guys can take a look at the bag if you guys want to in detail, but it's a bag with a keychain. The key to good health is not in your ignition. A magnet that was stuck to the fridge to remind you every day before you had breakfast. Yes?
What percentage of the R's and the I's did you actually go for a home visit, and what was the average length of time on that home visit?
In this project, since it was a pilot and it was a very small number that we started off with, generally you're looking between 5 and 10% of your total is your home visits. So in this case, we had approximately 20 home visits. And the average length of time is about half an hour to 45 minutes. But it's important to note that not always a home visit is an indication of the success of the project. And you know, the less people you have to go visit, which is more time consuming, and people that already have the information and it arrives in their head simply by them reading it and bringing it into their home by delivering a package is just as effective. And it's just those people that need a little bit of an extra care to it. So, for example, a large-scale project in Australia, they surveyed, or they did to 35,000 households. They had approximately 500 to 600 home visits. So the number does increase as the sample size increases. And the regular users that do require information become very similar to the interested. They get a reward and a thank you, but also they have the opportunity to request any information that they need. And then they go through the same process. They get an information. Regular users for bus that are already regular users for transit generally don't receive a home visit or a system experience, because in this home visit, which I failed to mention, is if you are requesting a home visit for transit, if the person that's doing the home visit feels that perhaps you may need a free month's pass to really become acquainted with the system, then that's distributed at that time. So 1 month free transit as well is given at that time for transit users. So they call it cannibalism if you give free things out to people that are already using transit, so we try to avoid that. The regular users generally aren't, if they're a transit user, don't get a home visit for transit. But they follow the same process. They get information, motivation, try to empower them to increase their use of the environmentally friendly mode, or to start perhaps not just transit or walking or cycling or carpooling, or a mix of those. Okay, so as Lavinia said, this was the first project in America, and so it was a test. It was a test to see whether our concept actually worked here in America and how well it stood up to the rest of the other projects that have been done worldwide. So the first indication was, let's just compare how the segmentation, the groups who are interested, who are regular users, and who are not interested, to the other pilot projects across the world. So starting from left to right, we have South Perth, which was in Western Australia. We have Fernheim, which is in Germany, Brisbane, which is in Australia, Gloucester in Great Britain, Frome, Paris, and Paris. So now, these are all areas within those. It's not the entire area. It's a selected area, just like this isn't Portland, it's Multnomah and Hillsdale. So as you can see, with a few exceptions, as you know, we're looking at in Germany here, it's a little bit of a different travel pattern, but for the most part, the numbers were fairly consistent. So that was the first indication that so far everything's going to plan, and that this concept is applicable in the United States. And so as you can see, we're looking at Paris. This is an area that has very low car ownership, so that can show you right there that obviously low car ownership will increase environmentally friendly modes. So in September, like we said, we did a survey, and this is what the baseline survey results were for the Multnomah Hillsdale area. And Werner, who is the managing director of SocialData, always likes to give this presentation because he always thought that Perth was a scary number for cars drivers, and then he came to America and noticed that, you know, I think we are 64, so we've definitely made a record here in the projects that we've already done. So the distribution, you're looking at about 10% is walking, 1% is bicycling, 1% is the motorcycle, 64 car as driver, and 19 cars passenger, and then a 5% public transit. So comparison to Perth, you see that cars driver is a little bit higher, and in terms of Brisbane, it's quite quite high. So it kind of paints the picture that as much as all the progressive initiatives that we're doing here in Portland are great and we're ahead of the times for maybe, in America, there's still some work that needs to be done. And we're going to go into detail a few of those trips to show you what those trips are and where those changes can occur, and they're quite surprising. They're not as hard as you may think they would be. Next. So, and this is just another way of showing you where those trips are occurring, the distribution on the left-hand side. So we're looking at trips that are entirely within the target area, so the Multnomah Hillsdale. We're looking at walkings, a little bit higher. Distances are a little bit shorter. Trips to downtown, you're looking at people are taking the bus a little bit more, so that's positive. But 62% are still driving downtown. And if you know where Multnomah is in Hillsdale, it's not a very far commute into the downtown area. And then trips within the metropolitan areas, so that's Beaverton and Tualatin and all those other areas. Major mode is car as driver, and then other trips, which are outside those areas, would be assumed to be a car as driver as the distances increase quite a bit. Another distribution showing you which the distances. I'll just quickly let you guys take a look at that. I don't think I really need to explain anything other than walking takes up most of anything less than 0.5 miles. But even 1.1 to 2.0 miles, car as driver is the largest mode choice, and that's still a fairly short distance. Next. Okay, so this is this shows you a picture of what's happening in the Multnomah Hillsdale area. So there are 850 trips per year per car in this area. So now car is the basis for trips, and there's 552 cars registered in that area. So if we look over here, 21% of these trips are up to 1 mile. 31% from 1 to 3, and 3 to 5 is 18%. And if we just look at this area here, that's 21% of the total, and that's quite a bit of trips. That can be 115 trips that are used by car, which is kind of scary. And that includes the ones that you drive to the gym to work out and then drive back. And somewhere, we don't need to go through all the numbers here, but I think what's important is to look at that somewhere in there, for someone to tell me that somewhere in there there's no alternative, that the car has to be used. And I think that the first column here shows you that I'm pretty skeptical to say that, that the leisure trip couldn't have been, walk somewhere, or hop the bus, or ride a bike. And that's just not everyone there, but I'm sure everyone in this room could change 1 or 2 trips per week. And that 1 or 2 trips means just going there and back, picking up, your milk, walking to the corner store instead of jumping in a car and going, 2 streets farther to the big store. Yes?
Do you have any kind of age data on the people that are involved with this survey?
In the survey, it was from 0 to, I believe, the oldest person was 96. So it's all-encompassing from 0 to 96. There is further data breakdown the City of Portland has in regards to demographics of the baseline survey, from females to males to age, how each person in each age group is traveling, what their activities are. There's further, but for this purpose, we didn't put it into the presentation, or we'd be here all day, I think. Yes?
Is that 850 per household, per individual?
That's 850 trips per year per car.
Per car.
This is a car trips per year. This is basis is the car, not a person. Does that? Okay. And this just shows you distribution of the activities. So baseline surveys, this is what people are doing in the Multnomah Hillsdale area. 22% of all trips are to work. 31% are leisure. 25% are shopping. And what's important about this is that in America, there's a lot of emphasis on the commute trip, which equates in this area to 22%. Okay, so 78% of the trips are not work. And that number right there shows you that there needs to be a tool that addresses those other 78%. And that's where SocialData's concept of individualized marketing comes in. Because we go into the household and we start at the house, and that's where all the decisions are made for all trips, not just work, but for where I'm going to go shopping, you know, taking the kids to soccer practice or walking the dog or personal business, going to the hair salon down the street, those kinds of things. So that's what's impressive, that we feel it's impressive about our concept, is that it takes into account all trips. It doesn't segregate one trip out from another. And the distribution over here just shows you that it's fairly similar in Australia. So the travel patterns of everyone, with the notion that everyone is so different, kind of seems to be less. As we keep going through this project process, we notice that there's a lot of similarities between the countries, including Europe. These are just the activities distribution within the target area, within downtown, within the metropolitan area. And they're fairly consistent. Obviously, we can, look at the 44% of trips that are downtown are work-related. So it shows you that from this area, the major trips downtown are more of work than they are of shopping. And people go to probably Washington Square, the other malls that are out in the metropolitan areas.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we funded this project. We put together a partnership with TriMet, and they contributed $75,000, and the City of Portland put in $75,000 for a total of $150,000 for the consultant. And that doesn't there were also other costs: printing, staff time, and then all of the materials that we handed out were mostly materials that TriMet had or the city already had. We didn't really create very much that was new because it was a pretty low budget for this kind of project, pilot project. And our partners in the project were the BTA, Bicycle Transportation Alliance, Willamette Pedestrian Coalition, Southwest Trails, and Multnomah County Health Department. Question? Was there a question? Okay. All right. So there's our target area, Multnomah Hillsdale. We selected the target area with TriMet. We get a lot of questions about why we selected Multnomah Hillsdale. TriMet was very interested in an area that had people in what they consider their target market, which is the occasional rider. And this area was one of several that they proposed. For that reason, it also had demographics that they liked. It was slightly higher income than some other areas. The education level in Multnomah Hillsdale is fairly high. There was, everybody had different ideas about what the perfect area was going to be. Some people argued in our group that it would be better to pick an area that was a bit of a challenge. This was, as Courtney will attest, an area that was a bit of a challenge, as you'll see in a couple of slides coming up. Others, including me, thought we should pick a really easy one, but it turned out to be a good choice, I believe. So I don't know how many of you know Multnomah Hillsdale, but this is the center of Multnomah right there, and one of the appealing things about the area was that it has these two commercial centers, Multnomah and Hillsdale. And they're really nice little town centers to walk to, and that's a real benefit. And here's the Lucky Lab and the Multnomah Art Center and the Center of Multnomah. Multnomah, you can see, has some nice street improvements that they did recently. Has good, yes?
Are the two areas, Multnomah Village and Hillsdale, linked? I mean, can you walk from one to the other?
Yeah, it's about mile and a half between them. Yeah, Capitol Highway runs right between them. And the streets are, one of the issues is that there are not a lot of sidewalks in Multnomah and Hillsdale, but there's not a lot of traffic on those streets. One of the challenges, there are some big arterials. So Beaverton Hillsdale Highway and Capitol Highway, Barber Boulevard on the south, they're tough to cross as a pedestrian, and I think that's an issue for walking. So there are some challenges. Here you can see the target area a little bit better. So this is Barber Boulevard along the south where I-5 runs. And, the big stores like Fred Meyer's down there. That's the biggest grocery store. Multnomah's here. Am I right? Hillsdale's up there. So Capitol Highway loops up that way. These are the green are the parks. Southwest Community Center is right there on Vermont, right at the top. That's a big destination for a lot of people in the neighborhood. And here you can see some of the demographics. The population is about 14,000, 2,200 acres. It's not very dense. 5 to 7 persons per acre is not very dense. And I've heard the figure that to have a really good bus system, you need 12 persons per acre. So that's a challenge. Homeowners, 49 to 65%, renters. It's a few more homeowners in Hillsdale than in Multnomah, a few more renters in Multnomah. Mostly Caucasian, median household income, $46,000 to $60,000. And here is, so when SocialData came in, as I said, they had not been in the United States before. They set up a company, SocialData America. This is their office, right? And they rented a house in Multnomah. There it is. This is one of their staff people, Uli, who was here for a while. So that's what they did, and that's Courtney's home right there. She lives and works and breathes. Now, Courtney mentioned the service sheet. This is the sheet that goes out to all the participants that ask for it. And they have to check off exactly what they would like to receive. They only get what they ask for. And so, no, I don't have that here. Well, we'll get to this. So as you can see, we put a little picture of the umbrella there. We had a walking tour that they could sign up for, but they had to check off if they wanted biking information, the bus routes, maps are right there. And as I said, they only get what they want. But one thing that's interesting is that most people, 69%, actually ask for information about all modes, as opposed to just one mode. And we found when we did the home visits that also applied. So people would check off what kind of home visit they were interested in, whether it was a walking visit or a transit visit or whatever. And we usually found that even though they said walking, they were interested in taking the bus somewhere and then walking, or finding out more about bike routes. It was rare that you talk to someone about just one mode. Here's the bag, as we showed you before. This is the bag. And inside the bag is a folder with the information that they asked for. So we gave them that, and then the umbrella and the little keychain and all that stuff. And we delivered, all the bags were delivered, hand-delivered to everyone at their home. So if they were there, we gave it to them, and if they weren't, we left it on their porch. And people were quite amazed about that. It was surprising to them that the city would go to the lengths of going to their home and delivering this information that they had asked for. And SocialData does a wonderful job of knowing that it's important to get it to them right away, so they would always get the information there within a couple of days, wasn't it? Of 1 day of what? Of receiving the request. There's the folder that I just mentioned that has all the information in it. Oh, you can see that we also talked to the local bike shop and the bike gallery, actually, and they gave a coupon for biking. Oh, I have to do it again, go backwards. This is one of the reasons that we like this area is that we had, it just by happenstance, we had just created a Southwest walking map. This is the Southwest walking map here. And Linda Ginnenthal in our office had spent a lot of time out in the Southwest finding out where all the trails are and the paths. And so this is it. And it has all this information, and it includes Multnomah Hillsdale, and then it has bike information and transit on the back. It's a great map. So we were able to use that, and it was really helpful, because especially for the home visits, we would go in and sit down and bring out the map and talk to them about where they lived and where they were trying to go and how they would get there. And a lot of people didn't know that, there's a little path from here to here that would allow them to cross an arterial or get around something that they didn't know about. And it was just a very helpful tool, so we were lucky to have that. Francie Royce, who's in the back of the room, is having a home visit here with a very nice young woman and her baby. And she actually, we had a press conference to announce the results about a week and a half ago, and she came and talked about her experience, and it was a real positive when she had that experience with trails. Francie helped her find how to get somewhere that she didn't know how to get to before. So there, as Courtney mentioned, there were about 20 home visits. Oh, I think you're on again.
So after all the marketing was done, we performed an evaluation survey that occurred during February and March, and that was to see how effective the marketing intervention was. So these are the results. On the left here you see this is what happened without IndyMark, so no individualized marketing, and this was the breakdown of mode on the left, and then those that participated in IndyMark. This is their mode choice after they were involved in the dialogue process and received their information and the motivation as well. And so from looking here, first we have, this should read trips per person per day, not year, so that was a mistake. We have 3.4 to 3.3. Generally, that's fairly consistent, which shows you everyday life really didn't change, even though the mode choice did change. Everyone's still living a nice and exciting life and aren't being deprived of anything. And yet, cars driver decreased here from 67 to 63. Cars passengers remained the same as 21. And then public transportation increased. So I'm just going to go through some to show you what the relative changes were. There's another slide that goes through what was this actual decrease and how many trips per person per year was this, what it equated to in vehicle miles traveled, and then gives us a reduction. So before we do that, Okay. That's all right. Okay. So as we saw that there was a decrease from 67% of cars driver to 63%, where was this shift noticed? For here, someone had made a question about age groups. This shows you, and it's just a really very rough scale or division between the age groups, that we saw a huge increase from the environmentally friendly modes in the male population from 20 to 59. And that's very different from what you see in Europe and Australia. Generally, you see that increase in the females, and here it was the males. So as this is our first project, we're not too sure if that's is going to be a theme or a potential target audience, or if it was just this area. But it's also to notice that this the shift happened across all age groups, from those under 20, from 0, to the 96-year-old person. And that shows that everyone has the opportunity to change or a trip and the mode that they use for that trip. This is just another distribution of activities. Where did those, what activities changed it in terms of their mode choice, how they got to that activity. Most of the time you'll see it in shopping and leisure, so we have 39% there out of the change. But another thing is that work actually, there was quite a large shift in work, which we don't really see as much in Europe and Australia, but here in America that was a little bit larger. So there is still room to change that commute trip, but it also shows you how effective is, instead of going to the employer, it can be just as effective as going into the home, because not only do you get an increase in that commute trip, but also we get to touch the leisure trip, the shopping, the education, the work as well. And it's just an even distribution showing that, again, trips can be changed for all activities, as well as all ages. So it's a good concept to blanket it, the whole change in behavior. Okay, so what does that mean in terms of numbers? I said they went from 67, a reduction to 63. This gives us some numbers. So here, like I said, at the far left, 67% of mode choice was car as driver before IndyMark or without IndyMark, and then we have the 63% with IndyMark. So that equates to 780 trips as car as driver before and 717 car as driver after, which is 63 trips per person per year have been decreased with this marketing intervention. So that, by doing a little bit of arithmetic, we end up with a 8% reduction, which is a relative. 8% reduction in cars driver. There was no reduction or an increase in cars passenger. It was kept steady. And then in terms of the environmentally friendly modes, we saw an increase of 37 trips per year, which was a relative increase of 27%. In this group, that includes all three modes. That's walking, cycling, and public transit. Due to the area, there was no increase in cycling. And if some of you are familiar, it's a very rough area for cycling, especially to get those that just want to start cycling. It can be very intimidating. So roughly half of that went to walking and half went to transit. So I guess the whole story right now is that we looked at that the IndyMark provided an 8% reduction in cars driver and an increase of 27% in environmentally friendly modes. And that equates to about 400,000 miles per year reduced in vehicle miles traveled, 400,000 miles reduction. And if we were to blanket that over the entire population and said that, okay, we're going to do the entire population now of Multnomah and Hillsdale, you're looking at about 5 million miles per year reduced. Question?
Absolute and relative, they seem similar to me. I mean, what?
Well, the absolute number is the actual number of trips, and the relative number just is a percentage. for you that you can carry over into, how should I say this to you? In actuality, is the same number. You just gain a percentage out of your trips. I'm just telling you, this is exactly how many trips. 37 trips. 63, the car's driver. And that's per person per year. I'm sure I didn't answer your question. You can go on to the next one. And this just shows you how did it compare to the rest of the pilot projects that we've done. We've done many large-scale projects that are occurring in Europe and Australia, but these are all pilot projects that were contracted out essentially to do the same thing, test the concept, and hopefully have a successful project and then go to a large scale. So Portland had a reduction of 8%, and then in South Perth they managed to have a reduction of 10%. Brisbane was about 10. Fahrenheim was 8, Gloucester was 9, and then Frome was 6%. So in regards to all the other projects, it falls right in line. And seems to all the applications that we've done, all the processes that we've done seem to be applicable here in the United States to achieve similar results. Question?
What was the length of time between the end of the marketing process before you surveyed them, and is that the same for every site? You have a standard length of time you wait before you resurvey them to see if they've changed? Is it the next day, or is it like 5 months later?
No. Well, there's I guess there's one particular standard is that if we survey, say, in September, we always do a survey a year later in the September. That's standard practice. Where it becomes more of a negotiation or a discussion with the client is where we have that interim survey to see some results. Some clients don't have an interim survey. They wait 1 year after to get a survey, and that's it, just 2 surveys. But in this case, we're having 3 surveys. We had one in September. We just did one in February and March. And then we're having another year after survey in September to see how sustainable it is. In this case, we had a survey. The marketing occurred between October and November of 2002, and then we surveyed in February and March. So that about 6 months in between.
Well, just because I was wondering, since it was raining for the last 4 months, maybe that's why no bicycling occurred.
And that's a possibility, and it probably is inaccurate. But when we do survey, there is a control group that's involved, and it does weight and take into seasonal variation into that. So the data has been weighted to compensate for the rainy March that we had and the wonderful September that we had. And these are 6 months in preliminary results. They're looking extremely well. And in September, hopefully that survey will just be a reinforcement of the success that we've achieved. And then perhaps, at that time we may see a little bit of increase in cycling. Yes?
I wondered if you were able, if households with children were any more or less likely to be interested in information, like changing their travel habits?
Well, we didn't notice anything in particular about that. I mean, the concept that we operate on is that we go into the household, and if one person in the household says that they're interested, then the entire household is assumed to be interested. Most of the time, it would be the parents that are interested as they're filling out, most of the survey, and you won't have a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old filling it out. But if one person is interested, then the entire household receives the information and receives the motivation and empowerment as well.
So, were there more households with children, or
Okay.
more like?
I don't have that data off the top of my head. No, it's something that definitely can be run. Analysis can be run as we have household size and we have those that are interested in, and we can determine the age groups that are in the house. And the average household in this size in this area was about 1.9, 1.7. Who's first? I'll let you guys govern. Okay, I think you're back, and then we'll go here. In the blue jacket.
Hi. So, it looks like the pilot project is really successful when you compare the overall decreases. But I don't know if you mentioned it or not when you said the private car trips per year for this area, for the Portland area. Were they compared to these countries? Just as a comment, like a critique for my own.
Right. Well, from the mode choice, from the first few slides, you could see where the mode choice was as car as driver, which was, I'm not too sure, but there was one that shows, Brisbane and Perth, for example, and their mode choice. So that should show you that it was fairly close. I mean, you're looking at these Western countries have car use as, car as driver about 50%. In terms of the European countries, the car use might be a little bit down. I know you're asking me whether the comparison of the car as driver is equal amongst these to assume that then that the results are equal and that they're comparable. And I would say, yes, they are, if that helps you. There's more data that we do have, and it's really hard to put this all into one presentation to show you all the data that we have, and especially Werner gave a presentation, our managing director gave a presentation on comparing 8 cities and their walking behavior and weighting out numbers and social demographic factors. And in that paper, we then compare and use the data and spend another 2 hours talking about it. So in a quick presentation, you can assume that these are all comparable and that everything's been weighted and everything is equal in terms of that. But we can always look into some other information if that's important. Yes.
What about geographic distance? I mean, those homes that are within half a mile of the retail core or an arterial with a bus line, I would think, would have much higher rates than those that are further away. Higher rates of walking and transit use.
Right. Well, what we did is the area was defined by the city, and we blanketed the intervention for all of the area, and it wasn't broken down into. There was no geocoding done in the contract and looking at these houses within this radius, what's their likelihood of change, or what is their change that's 1 mile away from the commercial zone as opposed to 2 or 3 miles away. So that wasn't done in this project. But that information can be fairly extracted if you looked at who the participants were and where did they live and what was their change from before and after. But there's nothing on an aggregate.
Wondering how TriMet felt about these results, specifically comparing the investment in this soft policy approach versus, I would assume a hard policy approach of increasing their transit service to change behavior.
Well, TriMet is supportive of this project. They put some money into it, and they've been very interested in our results. They're waiting again to see what happens in September. But for them, that is an issue. It's where the increases occur. They don't want to have more ridership on lines that are already full. They want more ridership on the empty ones. So, yeah, I mean, it's a concern for them to make sure that their buses are used efficiently and they're not having to put more capital into the system. Is that what you asked?
Well, I guess. I mean, going into this area, I'm assuming they had a lot of capacity on their system. And, there are several ways they can increase transit use. One of them is adding more service or more frequency or whatever. Right. But so they have a couple ways of investing. This is a soft approach. Right. And are they pleased with the results?
Yeah, I think they are pleased with the results. They, like a lot of people, they want to. These are preliminary results, and they want to see what's happening in September. But yes, the answer is yes. my turn. So we're about to finish up. Just want to give you a little information on costs. As we said, $150,000 for IndyMark, $5,700 for incentives, $1,750 for printing, and then staff time, and the brochures and everything. That was additional. Now, we're hopeful that we will get funding for a much larger project next. We've put in a proposal. I don't know how many people were here for David Bragdon's presentation about a month ago, and he talked about the MTIP process, and we have a proposal in that process for TravelSmart in the interstate corridor around the opening of Interstate Max. For our proposals for actually for $330,000. So if we're lucky, we'll get to do that project. That would be very exciting. So that's our hope. One way of looking at the numbers, because people are always asking, well, is it worth it, and how much does it cost? But if you looked at 14,000 people in that interstate corridor area, and if half of them, 7,000 people, took transit one trip per week at $1.35 per trip, that would be $491,400. So that's more than the cost of the project. So just to put it in a context that people understand. This is for a year. Now, whether you would actually recover that in a year, I mean, that may be. But if that occurred, you would recover your costs in a year. Yes?
When would you do this project in relation with the light rail? Like a while after it'd been there? Or like if it just was built, then a lot of the increase might be because there's a train now instead of bus? Like how would you differentiate?
We would do it after it was built, but pretty soon after. SocialData has done a lot of projects in Europe in that situation where they have a new infrastructure, light rail or some other big addition. So there are ways of tracking that. Actually, our project essentially draws circles around half a mile around 4 light rail stops. And you can survey kind of like this. So you could survey half a circle, would get IndyMark, and half wouldn't. And then you could tell. It'd be very interesting. You could see what happens if you build it, will they come? What happens if you build it and do TravelSmart, will they come more? So we're kind of excited about that prospect. If we got the MTIP money, it actually is for 2006, 2007, and we'd have to come up with a swap to do it sooner. So we're hopeful, yes.
I don't know if you mentioned, but is there any income range, specific income range you are targeting?
Income range for individuals?
Yeah, households.
We are not. I mean, when we do an area, everyone in the area that is contactable, that you can find an address for, is contacted. But in terms of, we do ask them income information, correct? Do you want to answer that?
There was a very general question, asked on the survey, what their income range was it above 50,000 or below 50,000? Nothing specific. This approach does work best with median range incomes. You'll still see success rates in the lower and higher incomes, but probably not as high. Generally because lower income people are already using environmentally friendly modes, and as well as too, as the car becomes more of a status symbol in the lower income ranges. And then the higher income ranges, the use of car is just a little more excessive, and it is also another status symbol in the higher income ranges as well.
Yes. Beck?
It seems to me that people are moving around a lot these days. So how often do you have to come back and do this intervention in an area? As people are moving out, they're going to be coming to a new area, need to learn all that new information, and new people will be in the old area. How do you get that information to them? How often? Is that something you consider an ongoing process?
I'll start to try to answer this, and you can finish. My understanding from what they've done in other cities is that well, number one, I know they don't go back and do another intervention. They have in Perth, correct me if I'm wrong, but the government wanted to make sure that the results were sustainable, so they actually came back not only 1 year after, but 2 years and 3 years after, and they found that the results stayed the same, which is kind of amazing. But the way I interpret that, if people are using alternative modes, the use is probably what reinforces it. But anyway, what you want to?
That point's a good point. The fact is that people do move around, and especially in the States, there's a lot more moving that goes on in other countries. Right now, we haven't gone back into community and have done an intervention for a second time, but that is something that should occur and hopefully will occur. What's important is to begin the process of behavior change and to go into those communities and provide information and motivation to those communities. But something like that, possibly you would go in around, between the second and third year after the program and do a refresher course. Wouldn't be probably as intense as it was before, but there would be some type of refresher that would happen at that time. And that would also, to kind of remind people and also to target those people that have moved into the community earlier.
Yes.
Just another question. I know that this project in particular might not necessarily reflect the right data for this question, but as far as for the interstate max, can TriMet use this information, or do you think they plan to create future light rail possibilities, or is this more of a reactionary, reactive type of study?
Francie, you want to answer this?
I don't think that TriMet needs.
This is Francie Royce, the co-project manager.
I don't believe that there's been any discussion with TriMet using this for studying light rail. What we thought might come out of this, and there may be, Courtney might know this, we thought that there would be some comments that people would give us, not only for bus service, but for infrastructure improvements, just in conversation, because there's a dialogue established. For example, I can't get across Barber Boulevard at this intersection. That kind of comment, as well as bus service. And those comments have been compulated, and we'll get those and we'll use them. But that's the level. It wouldn't be. I'm not anticipating that this work would be used for light rail planning at all. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
How generalizable do you see this being to the rest of Portland? I'm thinking a lot of Portland, you're not anywhere close to, like on the west side, close to a bus line or close to shopping. Some areas people probably already use transit a lot. Do you see this as something that could be expanded a lot, or there's just a few key areas?
Oh, I think there are a lot of potential areas where it would be very useful. But I think you're right. You need to find an area that, number one, has good transit service. If it doesn't, you don't have the alternative there to shift people towards. So, but Portland has lots of areas that do have good transit service. So I think there are lots of potential places to do it. Okay, let's. We are almost done. Basically, we've gotten our preliminary results. We told you about those. We're going to have our one-year final survey in September, and then we're looking for money. So that's our game plan, and I think that's all. So can open up for questions. Yes, in the back.
And looking at the very beginning, way back, when you were talking about the 0 to 3 miles seemed to be the highest percentage of single vehicles going around. And that strikes me as a zoning issue, to where if 52% roughly of the people driving around singly are within 0 to 3 miles of their home base. Don't we need to address, I understand you guys, this is a soft deal, this program, and this is a great program. I think this is really helpful, and it's helping to swing people that might be fence riders on taking public and not. But in a long-term solution, shouldn't we consider reevaluating how we zone our neighborhoods so that we could have a mom-and-pop grocery store again, so that we could have some place for people to go and pick up their everyday items that they would be driving the 3 miles for?
Well, this is a really a metro question. I mean, you probably know about 2040 and town centers and main streets and all of that. I mean, that's what I understand that type of zoning is supposed to accomplish. I'm not a land use planner, but I'm married to someone who does this all the time, and we talk about it a lot. So, but yes, I mean, I think you need to have the corner grocery store that people can walk to. I mean, I have one that I can walk to, and I love it. I don't get in my car all the time. But I know it's not that simple, too, because, you know, you have a little town center or main street over here, and, you know, do you want to put another store over here? Because the store is over there. Say, well, you can't put that one there because then my store won't do very well. So it's not that simple. I do know that.
One more quick question. Portland's pretty environmentally friendly as far as cities in the U.S. go. I think that's my perception. Are there plans to do studies like this in like an L.A. or a more congested and more densified area where there's probably less flexibility in choice of transit?
Well, Courtney can talk to you about that because
since we've done the Portland project, there's been quite a bit of interest around the United States, especially down in South in California. You know, we've been invited to do some presentations at some California planning conferences, Santa Barbara. We've been visiting Sacramento, Seattle. So that is true. It is become an interest to those communities that really do have a congestion problem and that do have environmental problems. And as California has a lot of limitations that are being put on them now for their admissions and how they're going to be building their cities from now on, this type of concept is something that they're looking at because it may be the only way to achieve certain things at the moment.
Anybody else? Yes.
I have a question. Are there a lot of participants that backed out of the study the second time when you interviewed them or when you did the survey? Because I would think people that back out of the study didn't really, you know, use the other mode and they don't want to participate anymore because they feel they don't use it anymore. I'm just interested in that.
I guess something to make clear at the beginning is that the after survey, the survey that was just done in February and March, is a survey that includes all groups, so all those that are interested, all regular users, and those that are not interested at all. So they're all approached for the after survey. Not everyone is going to fill out a survey the second time, but the response rate was 66%, which shows you that there was still a high response rate. And even those that did not take part in the intervention still were extremely cooperative in filling out the survey. So there is a percentage of people that drop out in surveying work, and those could possibly have been, you know, interested, regular users, or not interested. But it's a blanketed approach, so everyone's included in the after survey, not just the ones that have changed.
I should add that Courtney's fairly modest about this return rate, the 65%. The Metro modelers that listen to this presentation are amazed that they achieved that. They achieved actually an 80% response rate in Australia, in 75 in Australia, 80 in Europe. But I think part of the reason, at least that I understand from Werner, is that their survey is very simple. I mean, it's a short survey. It's designed to be customer friendly, and it's a written survey, but they call the people back and very gently try to help them answer any of their questions. They're very customer oriented, and that's apparently part of their success. So, yes.
I would just have a question about the interstate project or any further projects that might happen in Portland. because this was the West Hills and kind of a homogeneous, I saw the Caucasians are 70 or 80% or whatever. Do you think there'll be any added costs in other neighborhoods for translating these things to, or are these just going to be sent out in English and the response rates will be lower because it's the minorities that don't speak English?
We actually had that in our contract with SocialData. We didn't know at the time we contracted which area it would be, but we wanted to make sure that if we had an area where we needed translation, it would be included. So yes, we would.
So is that in the contract fees, or is that going to be in the staff time? Because your staff time was real general. It didn't put any numbers down there.
Yeah.
It could have been 10 hours of staff time. It could have been 1,000 hours of staff time.
That would be on their nickel, actually.
In fact, we did, not anticipating the area, we did have some people that were Spanish speaking as well as a few other languages, and actually did end up being extremely helpful, because we did have some language barriers that we were able to overcome by having a diverse workforce. Just to add that note, we did a project in Europe that used 45 different transit companies across 13 countries, and that was sponsored by the UITP, which is the International Transit Association. And there it was, we had different formats for different surveys, asking generally the same questions, but as you know, in every language is not always translatable, and so there was some time spent to ensure that each survey was done and it was applicable to each of those countries and was understood by the respondents, because it's important to know our approach is that the respondents are the customers. We don't dictate how they're going to answer a survey. We try to make it as easy as possible so that they can answer it and basically become orientated to their needs.
Yes.
I wasn't sure the definition of the non-indie marked person. Were they the not interested, or were they a control group? How do you differentiate between non-indie mark and indie mark?
Non-indie mark people is the before survey that was weighted for weather, seasonal variations. So that consisted of the people's behavior prior to receiving indie mark and that after, and was weighted by the effects of the season that was seen through the control group. Is that good? Yeah.
Anybody else?
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder, next week we have Dan Marchand from TriMet and also from our MERT program talking about welfare to work, the Portland Regional Job Access Program.